Welcome to the Empowered Women Life Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Karen Bashford. This podcast is for every woman who has ever felt limited by her past, silenced by trauma, or held back by society's expectations. Each week, we will share powerful stories, expert insights, and practical tools to help you become the leader of your own life. Welcome to today's podcast with Jayne Johnson. Jayne is somebody I met through networking. And then I've had the privilege of learning more about her journey through life that has been somewhat challenging. I'm pleased to say, though, she's now creating the life that she truly wants. And her business is very much about recruitment. However, I know from Jayne that she's very specific about the kind of people she will put into a business because she assesses what is needed and ensures that she matches that so the clients are never let down. So Jayne, just tell us a bit about yourself and how you become involved in recruitment.
So really the short answer to that is that I went into a recruitment business, Brook Street, and I was looking for a job because my boss at the time was driving me around the bend, and it was the quickest thing to do over the road at lunchtime, nip into Brook Street. And they offered me a job and said, have you ever thought about being a recruitment consultant? And I thought, well, it's a job and I'll be very well placed if any nice jobs come in. So yes, I'll take it. And it just became a passion. I worked with a really great group of people. Brook Street were fantastic trainers, really good at recruitment, really ethical, really believed in supporting the candidate as much as the client, took us through some incredible initiatives about helping mums return to work and skills training and anti-ageism, long before any of that became politic or the law or anything. And then I worked for Brook Street for 25 years and was made redundant. And I just thought at the time, it was when the internet was the way that everybody was recruiting. And I just thought, you know what, there must be people out there who want good old-fashioned recruitment, which is speaking to your client, getting to know them, and finding nice clients and finding nice people to go and work for them. And I only need to do a couple of those a month and I'll have covered my costs, and I'm not going to go back into this hell, which was high street recruitment at the time. And that was nearly 20 years ago. And it's grown and grown and grown. And my niche has become working with business owners and entrepreneurs who know that in order to achieve their growth goals, they've got to bring in good people, but not just good people, but the right people, because it's not every kind of person that is right for a growing business. So, and I love that because I love the passion and excitement that those entrepreneurs have about their business and about the changes that growth is going to bring. So, and I like being with them on their growth journey. So, yeah.
Okay, so I know from your profile and from speaking with you, what you do is somewhat different. So would you like to share what that somewhat difference is?
So I guess what I do that's different is that I help every business owner who's recruiting in a different way, in whatever way they need help with. And I also offer recruitment training packages. So people can spend 3 separate hours, not 3 hours all at once with me. That would be awful. 3 hours, separate hours with me online, going through an online, what I call the recruitment blueprint. And if they work through that with me, at the end of that, they will be properly equipped to go away and do their own recruitment and to build their own recruitment campaigns. And yes, there's a few tweaks that they need to do according to the job. You would have different assessments and second and third interviews for mechanical engineers than you would for marketing content writers. But the rest of it will be robust enough to be able to help them to not only to recruit effectively and with certainty, because we are recruiting people, not widgets or pencils, but we help them to mitigate that risk. And we also stay with them. I show them what to do with those individuals once they've onboarded them, and how important the onboarding process is to keep that candidate engaged and happy with them. And I also show them how to manage that individual once they've got them in the business with them. I don't just run away once they've paid my bill. I actually stay with them and make myself available and have book calls during the first 12 weeks of that candidate's employment to make sure that that business owner, who might not be a very experienced boss or manager or employer, and I help them to manage that probation period effectively. And people say to me, oh, I'm not very good at that. And, it's all going to be very contentious. But I show them that if the rest of the process is working, then it really doesn't have to be contentious in any way at all. And surprisingly, and recruiters might be a little bit surprised to hear me say this, but I say, my policy is to hire slowly and fire fast. If someone isn't working, yeah, I'll help them to get rid of them. But the way that I show people to manage their own recruitment and do it so thoroughly up front that it is unlikely that that person won't work out. So I think that's what makes me different and sets me apart, that no campaign is the same. Every client is different. And even clients that I recruit lots of people for over, the last 10 years, for example, as their business evolves and as they evolve as employers and managers and business people, so the process that they want to follow is different. So I literally partner with them along the way. So, and that's what makes me different.
Okay, well, I must admit, I was surprised to read, prior to you mentioning it, that you do teach recruitment, because for a lot of business owners, especially women, they don't necessarily have the confidence to go and recruit. So they probably hold themselves back from recruiting because of that lack of confidence. What would you say their main, I want to say, reason for why they're recruiting? What is it that drives them or encourages them to actually recruit somebody?
Because they're so when we're looking at business owners hiring for the first time, recruiting for the first time, it's usually because their business has grown. They might have started it on a tabletop and, in the school holidays or, whatever, working around the children, all of those good things. And the business is growing and growing and it's doing really well. But the people that they've reached out to help them with the business might be somebody else who's a mum from the school gate, or somebody who's a freelancer for whatever reason, because they're very worried about recruiting somebody because, gosh, that's a big step. Because what if this success doesn't continue? What if I'm not a very good boss? What if I employ somebody and then the work dries up? So it takes them a long time to realize that actually employing somebody is much the best way forward, because then they can have them there all the time. And they soon start to realize that, freelancers with the best will in the world are freelancers for a reason. And that is because they want to come and go as they please. And that doesn't always suit your business. So people will then think, well, actually, this is a big grown up step. They might be encouraged by their business coach or somebody else or pressures of work to take somebody on. So it's all of those reasons, really. And they are hesitant because it's not unusual for people to say to me, am I going to make a good boss? Am I going to be a good manager? I don't think I'd be very good at all of that. But they forget that they've been harnessing this group of freelancers very often for quite some time. And is that not, they underestimate themselves. They underestimate their ability to manage. And that's why, I'm a great promoter of having a process. Do it right from the beginning, have it all in place. And then you don't need to be contentious. Then there are no unexpected things. And I sit on interviews with clients. I write interview scripts for them because I know what they're looking for. I do profiling, so I profile them and help them to understand their own, what puts them in flow and what their challenges are. And then if they want to, then I will also profile any candidates that are coming forward for second interview with them, so that they can see how they interact with that person and how best to manage that individual. So yes, it's a very resourceful process, but it's very supportive and softly and taking the time and evaluate. I've been doing it for so many years that I know what questions to ask to understand what one person's challenge is, and that, you know, it might not be the same as another. So it's that one-to-one really that I think makes the difference, and that I enjoy getting to know the business owner.
Okay, I noticed that you do disc profiling. Does that play any aspect, or rather than aspect, is that part of what you use to find candidates, or is that separate?
No, so I don't do DISC, but I do talent dynamics profile.
Sorry, beg your pardon, talent dynamics.
And yes, I mean, some clients love it and wouldn't recruit without it. For other people, it's new, and that usually starts off with the business owner doing their own profile. And I've done 2 in the last week, and I think one of the business owners straight away asked me to profile her, the other person that she has in her team, and the other one is going to come back to me in a couple of weeks about that. So people see the value in that. But some people have already got their own way of profiling. You know, some people swear by DISC, and that works too. But and it's probably, if you're not doing talent dynamics, I would very much recommend DISC. No profiling tool is going to make the recruitment decision for you. It's going to help you, and it also helps you to understand yourself better. So if you understand that you're a person who is very creative, who has lots and lots of ideas all the time, who can't be bothered with the details, who isn't a completer finisher, then if you need somebody to do your admin and customer service, it's probably not a good idea that you get another creator. And because there'll be times when you'll be absolutely on fire together, but nothing will ever get done and nothing will ever get finished, because you're both uncomfortable and not at your best in that particular place. So I help people with whatever tools they need, and I offer talent dynamics profiling, but there isn't any benefit to it unless there isn't any benefit. Sometimes in recruitment, I see people say, oh yes, well, we're going to profile this new hire. That's what we're going to do. We've decided that we're going to do some psychometric profiling. That'll make a difference, won't it? And as much as I would like to sell them a talent dynamics token and a debrief session, on its own and in isolation, no, it won't be very helpful at all. It only really works if everybody else in the team has been profiled, and you know, the business owner themselves has been profiled and understands how that knits everybody together and how that brings everybody together. But just deciding to randomly profile somebody that without anybody else in the business being profiled doesn't make any sense. That was a long answer, wasn't it? Sorry.
No, that's a great answer, because it explained an awful lot. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so that could explain why. I found that when I run my own secretarial business, when I was working for the bank and such like, I was very, very focused on the admin side because that's where I had to be. But as soon as I moved across into coaching and sort of mentoring and healing, it was a totally different behavior within me that comes out. And at times I can sit and look at somebody and think, what are you? Because I can see that element of organization, but at the same time, I can see this element of people person. So how do you manage to gel that in a business? Because obviously you have had recruitment taking place previously, perhaps before you become involved, that is opposites, that are not necessarily what is needed, or just the person just doesn't know what they really are because they've got this organization, but they've also got the creative side, which I should imagine creates merry hell.
Yeah, and yes, I mean, profiling does help you to avoid all kinds of conflict in the workplace. Like in talent dynamics, there's a profile that, until I understood this profile, this kind of person would probably have gotten my nerves quite a bit, if I'm honest. And I look back and I see that I have had people in my team who were like this, and they're very strong on systems and process and data, and but they're also very connected to people and feelings, which makes them, they have to tell you the truth. So, you know, for example, I say, well, oh look, this is a lovely afternoon. You know, the sun's shining. I know it's January, but let's have a barbecue. That person would be like, oh, quick, they'd be on their weather app. They'd be looking at, you know, they'd say to me, Jayne. And I'd say, oh, don't, you know, that you're really going to spoil everything now. And they would have to tell you that at 3:30 it's going to rain, and that everybody's going to have to be told to bring Wellingtons, and nobody will be able to park on the field because it's going to be muddy. And all I'm thinking is, how much Prosecco do we need? How many people should we invite? You know, so, but in a business project, in a particular cycle, there is a time when that person, that truth and that authenticity and that candor is absolutely what's needed. But it's not, you're not going to put them in a customer service team necessarily. You're probably more likely to put them, they make fantastic bookkeepers. They don't mind talking to their clients, but they'd really rather not much of the time. And they don't like the unexpected. So somebody who really, really gets riled and very uncomfortable about unexpected things, if you're in a bit of a crisis in the office, you're not going to ask that person to cover the phones for a bit, because what will I say? Who was going to phone? I can't prepare for it. They like to prepare for everything. So you can see that if you recruited somebody who was that profile, they could do other jobs in the business, but every so often they would really upset other people around them, because they would be perceived as being a pessimist, not ever wanting to get on board. They don't want to have fun. They speak their truth when it's not asked of them. You know, nobody asked them for their opinion, and they chipped in, and they were so negative. And so you do need to be very careful. I'm just picking that one because it's an easy one to illustrate. But you could recruit somebody into the customer service team because on paper it looks like this person can do it, but they're never going to be happy. They're going to upset everybody else. They're going to leave after not very long. So yeah, that's an example, really. And so profiling doesn't only help with recruitment, but it also helps with ongoing management of staff, and how you communicate with them, and how you onboard them, who you buddy them up with to begin with. What their learning style is, you know, like somebody who's got a particular type of, like on the talent dynamics square, these people that are very systems and process and data oriented are what we call steel energy.
So you're bringing that kind of person into the customer service team?
Yes. So if you have a particular project going on within the business and it's new, it will help you to very quickly establish who should be given what to do in that project. And because everybody will have been profiled, and everybody is as much as possible working to generate flow in themselves and others, then they'll be happy to let somebody else do that. They won't think, it takes away the kind of hierarchical duties and gives people much things to do which help them to be in flow. So that builds trust within the team, because you know, it'll be like, well, I'm not going to do that. You know, Karen's the one that's really great at all of that data and spreadsheets and, you know, analytics nonsense. I could do it, but I'd rather lick the floor, you know, than do that. And it would take me all day, and it will take her half an hour. So it makes absolute sense. And of course, then Karen is like, oh, I'm being asked to do something that I'm really good at, and that's really important to the team. And everybody is uplifted. Everybody, you know, it builds trust. And talent dynamics say that where trust is built, then value comes, because people value each other, people value their workplace, and they create value in the business. So, yeah. So it helps at so many levels.
I can see that as well, because having been in a situation where I've gone for freelancers, yeah, I can see the benefit of Well, the benefit for me has been getting to know myself because I know how I work now. And I think for a lot of business owners, they don't realize how much of an input of their behavior and such has on somebody else within the business. So I know that I'm fairly laid back until somebody says, but I can't do that. And it's like, no. It's not that you can't do it, probably. It's because you're not prepared to learn it.
Yeah.
And then that is a case of, well, why aren't you prepared to learn it? And then I start niggling away at it, which is probably not the best way to treat a freelancer, I must admit. But it is this within me, this desire to actually encourage the growth. So it's recognizing that I have a way of doing things and that impacts. So how would a business owner, if they don't know themselves, what kind of problems is that likely to cause within a business?
Well, there's a particular profile that I was talking to somebody about the other day, and this individual is this profile, and this profile says that they are great leaders as long as everybody keeps up with them, and that they're very much the kind of person that they could be all dressed up and at the party before they realize that nobody else is following them, that they're all on their own. So they can alienate people because they expect too much of them, and they don't have the patience to get everybody on board from the outset. So they assume that everybody knows, and they assume that everybody's got the same level of enthusiasm and knowledge as them. And so they're very quick. They're quick thinking. They're very dynamic. They're normally very attractive, outgoing, gregarious people. And people want to follow them, but they get stuck because they feel they haven't got, this person hasn't got time for them, that this person will look down on them because they can't achieve that. So when that individual knows that about themselves, then it can remind them to make sure that their delivery and leadership is better if they want to get, people involved, particularly if they're a business owner, because they need people to do stuff for them. If they're that profile, they're going to be very much about outward facing and promoting their business. And so they're going to need people to do the other stuff, to do the admin and to look after their clients and to help build teams in a more supportive, touchy-feely way. And that makes it sound as though that profile is not a nice person. They are lovely people. They are very generous and very outgoing. They just get really exasperated because they forget to get everybody else on board.
Yeah, I don't get exasperated. It's just like my natural tendency to try and encourage and support and such like kicks in, which sometimes can, I presume, be very irritating. It's like, I don't need this, leave me alone kind of situation. So how do you contend with something like that comes up in the workplace and you don't know how to deal with it? Because obviously once you've recruited, it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend for somebody in that situation to do?
So if somebody that they're employing is not engaging in the way that they want them to, so I would sit back and I would speak to the employer and ask them what it is that isn't being done that should be done. I'll ask them to go back to, usually these things are something to do with communication, and I'll ask them to go back to, when was the last time that you sat down and had a performance meeting with this individual? How are you managing your catch-up chats or your performance chats? What is it that's on their job description that they're not actually doing? Why do you think they did that? Because people don't usually just do random annoying things just for the sake of it. It feels like they do. It really does feel like they do. But there's normally an explanation. So I try to I try to get people to understand why that individual may have behaved like that. And I also look at, I ask the employer, you know, what have you done so far? What have you said so far? Does this person know that that this isn't working? You know, what indication have you got that this isn't working? And if, you know, if somebody says that they've had this conversation repeatedly with this individual, and they've, you know, I've asked them I've told them that they're not fulfilling the requirements of the job, and we've looked at the job description, and I've offered them support, and, you know, and it's still not happening. You know, I'll say to them, have you asked this person why? You know, have you asked this person why they're not able to do this? Have you asked them why they're you know, what help? I would encourage the employer to say, what help do you need from me to achieve this? And if the person says, oh, I don't need any help, you know, I can do it. Okay, that's fine. So you send an email after that meeting and say, I'm really glad that we managed to sort that out. It is important. This is part of your job. You know, I'm really glad that you've seen that, you know, and you're constructive, but it is documented. And if that persists, and if that person really isn't able to and doesn't want to learn and do the job, then they're not right and they have to go. You know, that's, and when they do have to go, in my experience, a lot of reason that people keep employees for a long time when they're not happy with them is because they don't really know how to handle the letting them go piece. But if you've got it all set up right from the beginning, and you've got a proper job description, and you've issued the job description as part of your recruitment policy, and I'm not a qualified HR person, but I've been around this situation so many times. If all of that has been put in place, and you've handled your probation properly, and you've sat down with them and gone through the job description, and the job description has been given to them as part of their job offer, so that, you know, so when they go for their second interview, first interview, they get a copy of the job description, so they know when they're offered the job, they get a copy of the job description. Before they start, it's explained to them what the probation process is going to be, how many times they're going to have a meeting with their manager, and that their satisfactory performance is dependent on their completing probation to a satisfactory standard. And satisfactory standard is that you, by the end of month, you know, week 12, you'll be able to do every aspect of the job. And then when they're not, and you've extended probation and they're still not doing it, there isn't going to be any surprises. You know, everything will have been documented. You'll have sent them nice constructive emails. Lovely to meet with you today. I'm glad we agreed that you're going to be really putting yourself across learning this particular aspect of the job. I wish you every success. You know that I'm here to support you. I do want you to get this right. Please ask if there's any reason for not doing it. And shall we meet? Let's meet again in 2 weeks' time and see how things are going. So you're setting an accountability. You're making it really nice. You're documenting that. If this goes on and on and on, well, you can't go on and on and on. And there has to be a reason eventually that person isn't the right fit, can't or won't do the job, and you just have to let them go. And if you've extended their probation, then, you know, it's a short notice period.
Very, very helpful. I'm glad I asked that question, actually, because that's probably, as you say, that's the one thing that so many business owners would struggle with, is finding that the person doesn't do the kind of work or have the ability to do the job in the way that it's needed, and having that courage to actually take the actions to finish the contract is probably one of the scariest things they have to do. As scary probably as recruiting in the first place.
Yeah, well, I think I do think it's a big reason why, you know, that kind of, have I got enough money? What will I do if it doesn't work out? Those kind of reasons are why people are hesitant to do it in the first place. And they hear all these horror stories of people that, oh, you know, we couldn't get rid of her because, you know, she was pregnant, or we couldn't get because he did that, you know. And very often when you follow it all the way back to the beginning, they didn't really have a proper job description. They didn't really, there wasn't anything that you could measure them against to say, Jayne's underperforming against, we've set a standard that by the end of, by the end of 8 weeks, we've assessed that these individuals will be able to do this job to this level, or maybe that's a bit clinical, but, most businesses are not that far down the line. But, we would hope that this individual would know 80% of the job and would be making a difference to the business in this role, in this way. Then, and they've been issued with the job description, then it should make it relatively easy. And it's like anything, you can't buy an expensive plant and plant it any old where and then say, well, I'm complaining to that garden centre, it's dead, or I didn't speak to it, I didn't water it, I didn't, you do have your responsibility. The recruiter and your HR person can do as much as they possibly can, but you do have to manage that individual. And if you're not ready, you're not ready. But whilst you're managing that individual, you're also motivating them and you're learning from them, and we can learn ever such a lot from new starters in our business. I've heard of the people saying to me, God, she's amazing, that girl. I didn't know. We were sitting in our one of our induction performance review meetings, and she said, oh, could I just ask a question? Because you encourage them to input as well as much as they can during these meetings. And she said, why, when you're doing this, and it was something in their accounts process, or why don't you, it was something like, why do you create that and then save it there and then put it here? And he said, well, because, we need that for the bank. And she said, no, but you can just click into Blop and there it is. And he said, really? And she showed me. And he said, she showed me this incredible quick thing that's in Excel that none of us are using. So, or you can learn that. I had one new starter who was supposed to be taking over from the outsourced bookkeeper, but the outsourced bookkeeper had been there for years and didn't want to give up her role. So this poor individual was coming to her performance review meeting saying, no, I still haven't learnt Sage. I still haven't looked at payroll. I still haven't done that. And it turned out that that individual was blocking her at every stage. So that had to be dealt with. But without having those conversations, it would have seemed like, well, that process didn't really work. We hired somebody to do the bookkeeping and we're still paying the bookkeeper that we've always had. So how has that helped us? But if you didn't have the conversation, you wouldn't know that. Yeah.
Very, very true. Jayne, it's been phenomenal talking to you. I'm sure that anyone who listens to this would have benefited from it. I know you're an all-rounder in the sense of you will teach, you will recruit, and you obviously have the profile facility. So if anyone wants to speak to you, I will be sharing the links in the details of the podcast. But what would be the one thing you would say to anyone thinking of recruiting?
Plan it. Plan, scope it out. What do you want them to do? And in 6 months, imagine that they've started working for you and they've been with you for 6 months. How will you evaluate how successful they've been? What will that success look like? And that will really, I think, help to take you forward with your planning and your managing and your outlining the kind of individual that you need. I think that's, plan, and then how will success be measured?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. So
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It was a pleasure.